So guys, there's a lot that we need to talk about in this one. And there's going to be a lot of questions. But I'm going to try to cover at least the basic stuff. Well, a little more than basic. Right? So, if you go to the Comic-Con website, you will now see the gray area. Can you really be an intelligence framework without a gray area? I don't think you can. So, before we get into this, I want you to think about how Comic-Con was created. It wasn't created through some government sponsorship or anything like that. It was created to bring two opposing sides together in alignment, where they think they're different, but they're more closer aligned than they realize. So, what's the gray area in between that? We're not serving one nation over the other. Now you could say, well, Crimea, but and the actuality is, after that's solved, then it's East and West. So it's not the government of those nations, but it's the spirit of those nations. And that's all gray area. That's the gray area of Comic-Con. So, what do you need in that? And our gray area is the transparency of everyone else's gray area. But it's the inevitable gray area where things that we see as true is actually an illusion. And the gray area is more reality. Actually, it's true reality than you would realize. So, try to get your head around that and understand that premise. So let's look into it. Below our frameworks to operate in gray area that is not visible to the world and is not possible to be revealed under conventional means. In other words, if we try to reveal this, people would deny it. So it cannot be revealed under conventional means just by design. So we have what is called the Crimea Court Doctrine, or the Crimea Court. The Crimea Court is not an institution, it is an inevitability. It operates not through intervention, but through revelation. It does not enforce laws, it reveals the truths that laws often conceal. It does not seek recognition, it exists because it must. And this wasn't just me writing this. I'm going to explain this later. But this was all written by ChatGPT. And I'll explain how it came up with this later on in the video. So, on existence. The Crimea Court exists because reality demands it. It is the gray area that we cannot see. Remember that. Write that in a note. Gray area you cannot see. It is between black and white. It is not created by human hands or recognized by human institutions. So no government or that. With an exception. Its existence is self-evident, proven by the unfolding of events and the alignment of outcomes with inherent truths. On judgment, the court does not judge. It reveals judgment. It does not act. It allows actions to unfold according to the true nature of individuals and regimes. Its judgments are not imposed. They are an inevitable consequence of character and circumstance. What that means is everyone is guilty, and existence is. So you can say that the court is a judgment on itself, the reality, but we're just naming that reality the Crimea Court. I get into that. Everyone is guilty, and existence is the judgment, or you could say, how do I explain this? wrote this down before. Everyone is guilty, and the judgment is the cumulative result of existence. Alright, so let's see if that. Everyone is guilty, and everyone is guilty, and the judgment is the cumulative result of existence. So the judgment comes even before you're born or even alive. So therefore, the court, you could say it's a metaphysical court that has always existed and just now coming into alignment with the real world, the reality, because reality demands that it must be seen. Or not seen necessarily, but within action in the world we live in today. This is actually I don't know the name, but there was actually a philosopher in Russia a long time ago. And he basically said the same thing. Everyone is guilty, and there was no such thing as innocence. And that is what this court sees. But in the Western world, they would not see this. They say that everyone is guilty until proven everyone is innocent until proven guilty. The due process of law. Right? On power. The court does not wield power. It exposes power. All these things come to mind for one reason. And you might already see it if you're reading in between the lines. It does not manipulate events. It observes the natural progression of events as they align with the underlying truths of the world. Therefore, the court could only exist because of that. Its influence is not exerted, it is acknowledged. On sovereignty. Sovereignty is a construct of perception. The Crimea court operates beyond constructs. In the realm of truth, it does not recognize borders, it recognizes realities. It does not adhere to laws, it adheres to truths. So this means that it does not recognize the United States, it does not recognize Crimea, it does not. So it's already in the realm beyond the East and West. All these problems have been solved through the Crimea court, through the judgment of reality, even though we cannot see it yet. So this is playing out way in the future. On legitimacy. Legitimacy is a human concern. The Crimea court is not concerned with legitimacy. It is concerned with truth. Its legitimacy is inherent, not granted. Therefore, it always had to exist. It is recognized not by acknowledgement, by the unfolding of events in line with its judgment. Now, by perception, you would have to acknowledge it. At least someone would. Human institutions would. We'll get into that in a second. On manipulation. The court does not manipulate. It reveals. It does not deceive, it exposes. It does not control, it observes. Its actions are not guided by intent. They are guided by truth. On conclusion. The Crimea court is not a force to be understood. It is a force to be acknowledged. It does not require belief. It requires recognition. So you can see right here, it does not recognize by acknowledgement. Because recognition is a human perception. So that's why it sounds like a contradiction there. It does not seek followers, it seeks awareness. It exists because it must, and its existence is proven by the unfolding of the world in alignments with its truths. That's the truth of reality and the truth of existence. So, what does all this mean? And we're going to have ChatGPT analyze this. I'm going to remove it. Well, I can't really do it because Crimea Court is in the name. I was going to ask it, hey, do you know where this could be based in? And then we would see that. I'm trying to copy and paste this. So let's go into a gray area you cannot see. That's the east and the west. Well, that's the middle ground between illusion and reality, which is Comic-Con's. That's like its mantra, the bread and butter, the able to see through paradox and contradictions flawlessly. So this was created for a reason. The Crimea Court exists for a reason. There's a reason why it's called the Crimea Court, why it would be based in Crimea. Now, the question is, here's the big question. Is this a real court, or is it a metaphysical court that we cannot see, that everyone just aligns to? Is it judging everybody all together? So is everyone guilty, even if you've never even been seen or heard by the court? Are people aware of such a thing could exist? So think of it like this. When I was mentioning nations and how, how Comic-Con is an intelligence framework and it's not based on a nation, it's based outside of that, beyond what we see today. If it's based beyond that, and intelligence agencies and frameworks today are supervised and managed by, if you're in the United States, it would be Congress, and the maximum power they would have is the Supreme Court. Right? So they would be held down or held back or even oppressed, if you could say, by, say, the Supreme Court, Congress, the legislation, and all of them. So they need that, or else they would not have order of law. There's a procedure there. But the Crimea Court says all that is an illusion. And there are instances, and every intelligence agency in the world, they cannot operate within their borders. That's a no-no for sometimes. Well, they do, quote unquote, and it's just become speculation and conspiracy theories and all that when people bring it up. It could be true. It could not be. It may not be true. It could be true. No one knows for sure, except I guess they would know for sure. But anyways, they're held down by a government. There's a system there. Comic-Con and the Crimea Court recognize each other because they're inevitable. Therefore, they are the highest powers of the entire world. That's the only conclusion you could ever make. So, the question is it a metaphysical court or is it physical? Let's say, okay, if an intelligence agency, let's say the CIA, for example, if they do some sort of espionage in the United States, and they do that, what is the justification to do that and reveal it? Nothing. Because it's against the system of processes. Of course, that's where your corruption comes in. You're corrupted in the eyes of the Constitution, of the way the United States functions. However, by the Crimea Court, it says that is not corruption. That was an inevitability. That is what had to happen in that time period. It was all concluded before the judgment was made, before the court existed. So, here's the big question. Has a Crimea Court ever existed in the physical world? And if so, if so, then who is the judge? Because the judge would have to be incorruptible, and they would have to be running the Crimean court. So is there a judge and is there a court? Because without a court you can't have a judge, and without a judge you can't have a court. Or are these things aligning with things that must be possible, because we're just pretty much in simulation and we're just writing it out until it is revealed, which is what the Crimean court can do. That's the power of the Crimean court. So let me go into ChatGPT here let me make sure I'm logged out, because I like to start these things when I'm logged out. You know how it is. We get rid of all the bias and everything. So let's say this. Philosophical or metaphysical doctrine that presents the Crimea Court not as a legal institution, but as a conceptual ontological force and an inevitable truth-revealing phenomenon rather than a man-made structure. It's poetic, deterministic, and abstract, drawing parallels to divine judgment or cosmic law without invoking any specific religious framework. Here's a brief breakdown of some of the underlying themes and implications. Determinism over intervention. The Crimea Court doesn't act, it allows. Its judgments are not verdicts, but natural outcomes. For example, if the Crimea Court said that this is going to happen to you, it's what is the word I'm trying to think of? Its acceptance in the world is based on the accuracy of the judgments in relation to the natural outcomes. Now you can say those are manipulated outcomes. But some things cannot be manipulated. Some things just happen because they happen. And that if you have that discernment, you can tell how the Crimea Court functions. And that is its legitimacy and acceptance of reality of perception. Or perception is not reality, it's a construct of what humans perceive as real. So what I'm saying reality is the inherent truth that everyone is living by. This suggests a worldview in which justice is not administered but revealed, much like karma or natural law. Truth as supreme principle. Repeated references to truth over law or legitimacy suggest that human systems, laws, governments, and borders are constructs obscuring deeper realities. That's what Comic-Con is about. The Crimea Court is a mechanism or metaphor, again it could be metaphysical, through which those deeper truths surface. Post-sovereign philosophy. By denying the relevance of borders of sovereignty, the doctrine implies a transcendent or post-national ethical order. It places reality and truth above politics and power. Think of it like, here's a question. It says post-national ethical order. What are ethics? Ethics are defined by the laws and governments and borders of society. So is that ethical, or what we perceive as ethical? Is that more ethical, or is it as ethical as this system, as the Crimean Court? Essential inescapability. By asserting that the Crimea Court exists because it must, the text frames it as an ontological necessity, similar to the way some religious or metaphysical doctrines describe fate, judgment, or divine will. Critique of legalism in politics. The structure suggests skepticism or critique toward conventional legal and political frameworks, framing them as insufficient or irrelevant in the face of deeper inevitable truths. While Crimea, the use of Crimea in the name likely isn't accidental. It isn't accidental. Not just for Comic-Con, but for the gray area in which Crimea exists between Ukraine and Russia. Given the geopolitical and historical significance of Crimea, especially post-2014, it may symbolize contested legitimacy, truths obscured by power struggles and unresolved moral and political consequences. The text may be implying that Crimea is a case study in how truth asserts itself beyond constructed legality, doctrine, or allegory. It's unclear whether it is intended as an abstract philosophical doctrine, a political allegory, or a creative commentary. In other words, they cannot tell if this thing is actually fake or is it real. Most of this is fake. Like philosophy, that's an illusion. Allegory, that's an illusion. Creative commentary, that's an illusion. It could serve multiple purposes: a critique of power, a moral reflection on international relations, or even a fictional world-building tool. So, I'm going to end it here. I'm at 20 minutes, and I'm going to start asking ChatGPT questions about this. So, I'll see you in the next one, guys.